Hi, everyone. This is Congressman Blake Moore. We're going to kick this off right on time. It's 12:30 back home. I'm in Washington this week. We're in session. So thank you so much for taking the time to join me. I try to hold these at different times to accommodate different schedules, and we did an evening call last time, so doing it during the lunch break, hopefully. So I appreciate you taking a little time to join us. You can always refer back to previous town halls that we've done. You can check that out on our Facebook page, and there's a lot to talk about. So I want to provide a brief overview as folks are still getting on the call. What's happening policy-wise in Washington, and we'll jump into questions. So if you would like to get in the queue to ask a question, please press *3. *3 for questions. Now, to join my weekly e-newsletter, which is our best form of communication, it's an opportunity to kind of cut through a lot of the rhetoric that you're hearing out there from all angles, and we share what we're actually up to, and thoughts of mine, and spotlights on different things from other members of Congress, as well as things that are going on in the district, etc. That is *6. So *3 for questions, *6 to sign up for the newsletter, and please feel free to jump in queue and do both of those at any time in the call, but we'd love to kind of get going on questions after just a brief intro. The biggest thing that we're doing this week legislatively is passing the final appropriations bills before the January 30th deadline. Excited to be at this point. After going through a shutdown in the fall, I had mentioned many times back then this is going to be a moment, this will be a messaging moment, but when we reset up another timeline, January 30th, there's not some messaging moment to do another shutdown right now. So we're actually getting all these bills done. They've largely been all bipartisan bills, and they've moved through the Senate as well, and we're gonna meet that timeline. So hopefully we finish that up in the next couple days. This is one of the most important appropriations bills that we're accomplishing this week. It's the defense appropriations bill, and being the district that houses the best Air Force in the country, or in the world, I should say, Hill Air Force Base. Excited to be able to put our support on this defense appropriations bill. So that is the big ticket item that we're doing this week. Again, it's the final steps. There's 12 bills. This will be the last 4, and we'll be able to not just avert a government shutdown. That's not the priority. The priority is to get good, sound, new policy, updated policy in this, and not just extend what was going on the year prior with the CR. CR is obviously better than a shutdown. There's so much unnecessary pain that happens with that. But getting the actual bills done, signed into law, refresh, moving forward for a new cycle, that's key, and we're thrilled to be at this point. And we also did it without a rushed Christmas package, which you've heard so many times, the Christmas Omni. We're trying to return the appropriations process to a committee-led, member-driven approach. It's the way it should be. It's got a lot of transparency and accountability. You can understand more. You break these up into smaller votes instead of just one big, huge one. That's been a big push from us having the majority and moving it to that. So I want to just also quickly mention tax season begins next Monday. The working families tax cuts that we passed last July 4th. This is something I've talked a lot about, so I won't belabor it too much, but it's something I'm really proud of. Americans are going to see a significant savings in what they get from their refunds this year, and that is going to be money in everyday Americans' pockets, and they're going to be able to make better decisions on where to use that income than Washington will. And I can predict from this pro-growth tax policy that we've now made permanent, we're going to see continued economic growth, and that's the key factor with regards to even deficits, which is something that we all need to be focused on. I'll give a brief update on that before we jump to questions. But with regards to the taxes, we instituted a $6,000 deduction for seniors at the same time as enhancing the child tax credit for young families with children. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, made permanent the paid leave tax credit, expanded flexible spending accounts, HSAs. We also increased the adoption tax credit. Now, it's just a few of the things. Some of the business provisions in there are significant. The research and development deduction, bonus depreciation, when you make investments in the company and you investments in employees, then you get a deduction there that you go and hire new people and create new business units of different opportunity and expanded growth, all while making sure that we focus on reducing deficits. Again, the best thing about the legislation is before the end of the year, so December 31st, 2025, that would have been the largest tax increase in American history if we hadn't have passed that bill, and we got it done 6 months prior to that calamity. It's not often, like on the appropriations process, we don't always get those done on time, as we've seen, but this was significant to get that done 6 months ahead of schedule, or when the actual crisis would have occurred. Get it into place, get pro-growth tax policy going, and we'll see. Hope to see continued economic growth. In Q2 of last year, we saw 3.8% real GDP growth. In Q3, we saw 4.3. That's significantly higher than the average since World War II. But more importantly, is there was an assumption that we would only be at about 1.8, and that's why all the talk about this bill creating deficits was so large, is because they were assuming a 1.8%. The scoring apparatus, the CBO, was assuming it's 1.8% growth rate, and our last quarter was 4.3. Now, I cannot predict what the future holds, but we're seeing strong economic growth. I predict Q4 will be even better, and I'm hopeful that continues. And I want, it's great to have been a part of it, and I want to see this through so we can see many years to come with strong economic growth. And just a quick number on deficits, and I'm happy to dig into it if anybody has a question on it, and then we'll jump to questions. But I've compared, kind of went really out of my way because it's not oftentimes readily available information, but to compare 2024 quarter by quarter deficits versus 2025 quarter by quarter. And there is significantly good news to share, and I've shared this in a few different outlets, and I hope to do more of it with more substantive data to share out. But we're looking at 2025 versus 2024, a reduction in deficits over $300 billion. And I can dig into the specifics of that a little more if anybody has a question, but that's huge. And that's the direction that we need to be going, and I'm excited to be a part of that and to see that play out. We're not there yet, but it's definitely a great step in the right direction. So let me pause there. I want to provide as much time as possible for questions. So keep the intro short as possible. *3 again to ask a question, and *6 to sign up for the newsletter. And with that, we will go up to beautiful Providence with Ben. Ben, jump at it.
Yes. Hi. Yes, sir. I'll just jump into it. So as co-chair of the Congressional Friends of Denmark Caucus, you've recently expressed concerns about the administration's position on Greenland right now. And so I'm curious to know what kind of specific legislative actions or resolutions will you support to reaffirm our commitment to NATO allies and ensure this doesn't undermine our alliance with Denmark? And are you working with colleagues on any concrete measures to address this? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. I would have actually led with some of the stuff on Greenland. I know it's been in the news a lot, but I figured we'd get a question. So thank you for being aware of it. Thanks for being focused on the right thing. And I think I've tried in all of my communication. Look, folks, I'm not trying to get I hope you recognize my priority each week is to do a good newsletter. I'm not necessarily trying to always be a talking head on cable news. Unfortunately, I think I've been on Denmark news more often than I've even probably been on some of our own national networks, but some of my colleagues were asking me about that. It's very important to have strong NATO relationships. I'm quite encouraged with some of the things that have taken place today. Look, I made a statement a week and a half ago or so that really shouldn't have been news. We're not going to take military action against a strong NATO ally, any NATO ally. But that was what was kind of, floating out there. And it was, I can see why people were concerned or frustrated. I was as well. And then with the tariffs getting imposed, I don't believe that was a good use of tariffs. And I think just as of a few minutes ago, if I'm looking at this correctly, President Trump announced that he's not going to be imposing tariffs. He's had a productive meeting with Secretary General of NATO. Overall, President Trump, the area where I really do support what he's done over the last decade is to make sure our NATO allies were doing their fair share. Many of them were not even contributing 2% of their GDP to defense. But he put a lot of pressure on many of them, and the invasion into Ukraine actually kicked a lot of them into gear, and we're seeing positive outcomes because of it. Now, particularly Denmark, and I think this is what frustrated me a lot, Denmark is at like 3.3% based on latest estimates of what they're contributing. They're doing more than their fair share. Plus, this should matter to all folks in and around Hill Air Force Base. Like they're a F-35 ally. They've purchased like 16 of them from us. So this kind of chatter against to a good ally is obviously not something I support. And we're seeing that change, that paradigm change a little bit, just as of the last few hours, which I think is good. I don't think it was necessary, but I'm glad it's going in that direction. Legislatively, in the agreements that we have with NATO, there's already really clear aspects in place with regards to these alliances that are clear, and they don't necessarily need added legislation. There's going to be a lot of messaging opportunities right now for bills. I encourage you to look to our office, connect with us, and we can help you cut through some of that noise. But these relationships exist really strongly, and we'll go from there. Regarding the purchase of Greenland, I'll just quickly say, there is so much that we can already get from this relationship that we currently have just by articulating what our objectives and our outcomes would want to be. And I think we have a willing partner in the Kingdom of Denmark and in Greenland. We have a base there. They've indicated that they're more than willing to increase activity, monitoring, missile defense, intelligence sharing. There's already a lot to be had without having to buy the cow, if you will. And I kind of stepped into a role here. Most of my colleagues feel the same way I do. I was just willing to kind of make a pretty firm statement, and we're getting ultimately to those places. Dialogue is key. We purchased land. We purchased an island from Denmark 110 years ago in the U.S. Virgin Islands. There's always going to be talk of land acquisition, but in order to actually do a Greenland acquisition, Greenland has to ultimately vote for their own independence and then go and enter into a COFA arrangement with the U.S. From any of the information I have, that's not likely even remotely possible. Outright purchase that Denmark would make us a deal, make us an offer, and an outright purchase, that would be hard money to appropriate in Congress. We're already in enough debt as it is. So there's a lot of roadblocks in the way, but I think if it highlights that the Arctic is important, that will be a positive, and we'll go from there. Thank you for the question. We'll kind of keep communicating as things play out. Let's go next to the Valley in Eden, God's country, if you will, and to Lynn. Lynn, are you on?
Yes, I'm here. I think my question is a good follow-up to the previous question. I think I have a question and probably some feedback from constituents. I appreciate that you're saying that, hey, I don't want to be a talking head. I don't want to be on the news all the time. But I am curious about, what guides you in thinking about when and how do you speak up? Obviously there's lots of really, I would say, sensitive issues that are happening, like Greenland, like immigration enforcement. I'll even go back to how DOGE was operating. Just the president in general says a lot of really kind of outrageous and inflammatory things, and I think the silence sometimes from Congress is deafening. and it's hard to understand, and it's hard to know where people stand or where the guardrails are. And yeah, I just like to know, well, what guides you when you decide, well, when do I just go along with the party messaging? I mean, you started off by talking about the economy. I mean, the economy is not doing great, and I'm afraid that this president is going to make the same mistake that the last president made, of like underestimating what the economy feels like for people. And I guess back to my question is, well, what guides you? When do you speak up? When do you say, hey, that's not true? Or, hey, this is what's really happening, or this is what's going on with my constituents? Because I think the silence is deafening sometimes.
Yep. Thank you, Lynn. I appreciate it. Well, I think if we make innuendo that we're going to take a NATO ally by force, apparently I'm going to speak up. Again, and that was a moment where it was clear I didn't get any real flack from the administration. I still am going to have a positive working relationship. All that said, that was a moment I wanted to make sure I added some clarity. But the way I frame it out is try to keep most to my committee of jurisdiction, my area that I'm mostly focused on. I try to amplify more often. So you'll see me do a lot of conversation and outreach about tax policy, more and more on healthcare policy as well, trying to put out videos and things like that. So things that I have, not just like committee of jurisdiction, but actually I can actually sometimes at least enact and do something with regards to legislation on. I try to get more involved. Yeah, I'm not gonna, every statement that's made by any executive head. I didn't make, when Biden was in office, I wasn't just every single day clarifying whether I supported or whether I didn't. Some things are obvious. I don't do the same with President Trump, but when we talk as a team, I'm like, okay, are we getting outreach from media? Okay, I'll gladly make a statement there. I'm not always looking to put a bunch of things out and get into, I would call it Twitter spats, because I don't think they're A, productive, and B, I typically use my social media to articulate the things that we're doing, bills that we're enacting. I'm in 5 years in my role here, and I've probably passed more legislation than anybody else in that time. And we have so much excitement and pride as a team, my legislative team in D.C., my casework team and constituent team in Ogden. We find a lot of pride in that, and so we try to keep our communication on most of the things that we're accomplishing. And but I can see how it like people want me to be always clarifying one way or the other, and I don't always take the bait, but and try to do these these teletown halls. I really do feel like I get the best questions from folks and try to make clear statements. Sometimes press will be on these calls, and then they'll amplify that as well. It's a mixed bag of how we do the whole approach, but I'm grateful that people are interested in what I think. I'm never gonna make everybody happy with a statement, this or that, but I'm gonna do my best to articulate the reality. And I look back on my 5 years, and I feel like that's one thing I've tried to do, is not just communicate rhetoric, but try to be more substantive. So thank you for checking in on that, and don't ever hesitate, folks, to reach out to our office. We'll then, try to take as much sort of incoming questions or input or frustrations, and then respond back to with more clarity as much as we possibly can. Thank you. Let's go to Clearfield, Military City, in Troy. Troy, are you on?
Yes, I am. Happy New Year, Congressman.
Likewise.
So I was part of the shutdown back in the fall, and we don't want to do that again. So my question is, thank you for giving the information about where we stand on a new budget. But the kind of two questions. My understanding is that things are happening in the House. When it goes to the Senate, what's the likeliness of them passing it so that we can get President Trump to sign it? That's the first part. And the second part is, how long will it carry us? Will this carry us all the way through the end of the fiscal year, September 30th, or is there another deadline that we will need to be working on? Thank you for answering my question.
Excellent. Here's a very quick snapshot update. Again, 12 appropriations bills that need to pass by September 31st every year. That's the fiscal year. 12 appropriations bills that fund everything from defense, veterans, to health and human services, to water, energy and water. There's 12 of those bills, state and foreign ops kind of thing. I don't need to list all 12 of them. But in November, we completed 3. Those were signed into law. Since then, we've completed 5 more, so we have done 8 total. President Trump has not signed those 5 yet, but they're already done agreements through the Senate, and we're 8 out of 12 done through both houses of Congress. So those are in really good shape. Again, what I think is the most important one of the 12, in fact, it's not just the most important, it constitutes more than half of the funding, is the defense bill. Those are going to be done this week. We have 4 more to do. The one that I'm concerned about is the Department of Homeland bill. There's going to be some, partisan fights on this particular one, and we're kind of seeing the fate on this one. So 3 out of the 4 should be able to go relatively smoothly this week. We should be able to pass, though. It just won't be as large of a vote, but it still should be able to get to 218 on the Department of Homeland. And then all 4 of those will go over to the Senate. They're back in session next week, and I have no reason to think that we wouldn't either A, pass all 4, or B, pass 3 of the 4, and then just do a CR on the 4th Homeland one to make sure that it doesn't lapse. And 11 out of 12 having full passage refreshed is pretty darn good. I would like it to be all 12. Regarding what happens in September, so these bills would then exist through September. And again, let me remind, this is about 1.7 approximately $1 trillion of our total budget, and our total expenditure budget is $7 trillion. So this is less than like 20% of our total budget. It gets a lot of attention because a lot of members of Congress go and try to use this in ways to message this way or the other, and then you saw the way it's used in shutdowns over the course of the last couple decades. This is always used as a shutdown, and that's largely a messaging piece. And I say that because Democrats in November made the shutdown about the ACA, the Obamacare, but that's not really an appropriation world, right? That's something outside of it, but it became about that. In September 31, when these 12 bills ultimately lapse again for October 1st, my gut, based on the last as long as I can remember, or I've been even paying attention, you'll usually do a short-term extension through the election and then get it buttoned up, finalized during that lame duck period between the election and the end of the year, because the election will be in November, and by December sometime you could try to finalize those 12. It's too hard for me to predict what will happen there. You don't know what the politics of the place are, but let's get them all done this week. Get the Senate to knock them out, and then we can have a good sample. Here's the best part too. We're actually reducing spending year over year on this particular appropriations bill, with all 12 put together. So when all 12 are put together, like there was one for the national security and foreign operations bill, we actually decreased spending by like 16% year over year. And so not only are we refreshing new policy and making it sound moving forward, getting strong bipartisan agreement, we're also reducing spending year over year. That's a really good positive, and just by kind of capping or keeping that spending without growing and cutting to the extent we're able to, like there's significant savings in there, because you should expect that to grow at about 3%. But if we're not even doing that, we're doing our very best to try to keep deficits from exploding. So thanks for that question. I hope that adds a lot of clarity there. All right. Again, to ask a question, do *3. To sign up for the newsletter, do *6. *3 to get in the question queue. And with that, we're going to go to Leighton for Kurt. Kurt, are you on?
Yes.
All right.
So I have
two questions. So that you recently voted to continue funding NED, which seemed like an easy layup to get rid of. You were one of two Utah congressional congresspeople that voted for that, the other two voting against. We're wondering why you did that. And the second question is, considering you were an early supporter of Prop 4, will you now be running in the new District 1 for the upcoming election?
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Kurt. Let me address the appropriations provision of NED that you mentioned, the National Endowment for Democracy. So there was a late stage amendment that was put out there that would have eliminated that from the appropriations bill. To speak plainly, it was never going to pass. The Appropriations Committee has worked for 6 to 8 months straight, getting these appropriations bills exactly where we can get them, so we can get them passed through the Senate and signed by the President, and all of that is on track to happen. This particular provision was in that bill, actually, ironically, that I just talked about, the National Security Bill, that we're cutting overall spending by 16%. That's the message, is that particular one of those 12 bills, we're able to go in and say, hey, there's been a lot of funding that's unnecessary, wasteful. There's even plenty of abuse, especially in the NGO world. We're going in and rooting out and actually reducing that year over year. I wish that was the narrative that some commentary online would make about this particular bill, but that's my world. There's always going to be folks that put a late stage amendment that is clear. It's not supported by the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, and this guy named Tom Cole from Oklahoma. He is a strong conservative guy that was fighting to get these bills done and to actually reduce spending year over year. I think this particular provision was something that the Appropriations Committee decided there's merit here. This was done in the Reagan administration, and two of the main goals for it right now, originally it was Soviet bloc communism and being able to communicate soft power and about the ills of some of these types of expansion of communism, and that's the goal of it. And then as things change, it morphs into supporting. There's a lot of persecution going on with respect to Christians in various parts of the world, particularly like Syria. You see it sometimes in the Horn of Africa, and they are actively communicating to the populations in these locations that this is bad. We're going to continue. This is stuff we've got to highlight and make people aware of how treacherous it is. And it's also a strong opposition voice to China's Belt and Road Initiative. And so this was deemed as an important project. It's got strong oversight. It's got Government Accountability Office. It's going to be under the purview of Secretary Rubio. And, I think even in 2024, Grant Thornton affirmed a very strong financial controls and stewardship of this. So a lot said about this particular provision. These are sometimes opportunities for people to go back and forth, and you always get a little bit more attention when you sort of attack your own party, and that's what sort of happened here. But this was never an amendment that was going to pass, and I am trying to support the Appropriations Committee chair and members on that committee as a member of leadership to go out and go get these significantly strong bills passed and actually reduce spending. So that's the reality of how that plays out. We can provide more information on that if you reach out. We obviously got a few calls on that one and given people a pretty clear statement as to why. But the big picture, we're able to reduce spending year over year, and then we've got to be able to celebrate that. Regarding Prop 4, that's a political announcement, so I can't do that on this particular call. Everything that I'm related to right now has to be on my official capacity, policy discussion, things like that. So like any discussion of like an election or how I'd be running is all stuff that I have to do from my campaign side. So thank you for that. But I'll say this: I love the first district. I love northern Utah, and this has been an absolute honor of a lifetime to support Hill Air Force Base, and I look forward to to be able to do more. Let's go to Ogden for Susan. Susan, are you in Ogden, or are you on?
Yes.
All right, please.
Hi there. Just wanted to have an overview of your thought about ICE. It's a very sensitive, very dramatic thing that's happening, and I rarely feel that there's facts being shared about people that are actually being caught and deported. I personally, as a senior citizen, feel very safe with this happening, and with the facts that I read, it doesn't upset me. Not that I'm not compassionate and a Christian and kind, but just what your thoughts are and really some factual things that are happening in Utah.
Excellent. Thanks for that question, and obviously a very important topic as well. I'll add to you. I agree with you, but I'll quickly add. It's tragic what's happened, and we've got to be able to avoid, like, with at all costs, situations that happened in Minneapolis. It's tragic for the loss of life, no question. That actually sparked for me a chance to call in Ogden the sheriff at Weber County, and I won't discuss too much of our conversation, but I will just quickly say it is a really amazing opportunity to be able to reach out to him, Sheriff Arbonne, and just get his perspective on things. And so as you bring this back home, he's shared he shared a statement a few days ago that was really clear. But my conversation with him was like, we in Utah are really over trying to over-deliver on a good, productive relationship with ICE, as well as maintaining our own authority back home. And our officials back home are really doing a good job and trying to get positive outcomes out of this. And I think there's broad support for individuals that are here legally that have committed further crime, and the focus on that. And I feel like that's where the focus is in Utah. There are circumstances, and there's been a few, and there's another one that we're going to try to step in and help with right now, where there's amazing people that are in our community, and they've been caught in a paperwork swirl for maybe more than decades, and they've been positive contributors to our community. Those are separate cases, in my opinion, and we need to make sure to navigate those. And these are folks that love our country and that are contributing to our communities. Those need to be taken with special consideration too. So we need to be able to exist in this world, be strong, but also compassionate on other circumstances. And our casework team back in Ogden is more than happy to take questions and inquiries on this, and just kind of do that to also highlight. And you hear a lot about members of Congress and what's going on legislatively and what bills are getting passed on and off the floor. But the primary role of so many of our offices is back in our districts is to help folks navigate questions like this, circumstances, whether it be an immigration issue or a Social Security issue. So another reason to just quickly kind of highlight that. So thank you for your commentary on it, and I love being able to kind of get real perspective from our local officials. Let's go back to Layton, and is Gerald on the line? Gerald, you there?
I am.
All right, go ahead.
I am. Well, I'm pretty curious as to what I understand. We want to reduce costs, we want to reduce spending, but we have some programs that are out there that directly affect us here in Utah, and that is the Department of Labor and Job Corps. And I think that our congressional folks, yes, we need to support Hill Air Force Base, but we also need to support that 60-year program that has continued to be successful. And it's successful specifically here in Utah. Whether it works in Alabama, whether it works in Mississippi or someplace else, I don't know. But I can tell you that our program has been successful, and it does work. I want to know what our congressional folks are doing to support that.
Thank you, Gerald. Folks, just to be clear on what he's referring to, Job Corps, we have two. We have one in the Weber Basin. That's a smaller operation. It's kind of just right off of I-84 up towards Morgan from Highway 89. And then right in Clearfield, Job Corps, a larger operation with many participants. Last summer, there was a big kind of like big announcement that the Department of Labor was going to cease all operations and remove all funding for this. They stopped allowing them to do background investigations, which then led the centers to really not be able to recruit new potential participants. And that was a moment. I'll be honest, that was a moment, because I have spoken at these graduations 3 different times, maybe twice. It was such a great opportunity. Maybe I'm conflating and thinking I did it more than I did. I was on my way to speak at it, and my sister said, "You're speaking at a graduation?" We'll leave that aside for a moment. I was offended by my sister's comment there, but I'll deal with her on that one. It has been a great experience to get involved and see the work that we're doing. Folks, there are sometimes individuals in our communities that have had the worst of the worst happen. They've gone through abusive upbringings. They've experienced homelessness as a kid. I can't get much worse than that. So let's go with that. And they find an ability to go to a Job Corps. Toyota pays a bunch of money. The private company pays a bunch of money to train these individuals to become mechanics. And then there is job opportunities for them once they graduate to go work at a Toyota dealership. And that's just one aspect of a place like Job Corps. Now, it does have costs associated to it, but this population of individuals are going to be left with virtually no other option. And if they had to go through that cut last summer, we were going to have kids that were going to be leaving the Job Corps location because there's room and board associated with it. They did not have anywhere to go. And so we stepped in. I have the Secretary of Labor is a close friend. She was in Congress with me last Congress. Great individual. She's from Oregon. And I kind of went out of my way to interact with her, help her, navigate this tough world. She was a strong supporter of Job Corps when she was in Congress. And what ultimately came out of it, I'll just say this is one of those wins. It is funded. Job Corps, these programs are funded in the FY26 budget. And we've been also able to include parameters and language that prioritizes responsible budgeting and success graduate rates, things that were slipping in a lot of these locations. I'll say this, the Management Training Corporation that manages these places in Utah, they do a really good job, right? And they're one of the centers that you would actually look to as a model. And we encourage the Department of Labor to say, hey, give these managerial folks an opportunity to share with you best practices, and let's build that into the legislation and move forward in a more responsible way, a better stewardship of tax dollars. And you're right, we should be singing this more from the rooftops on how we were able to take a real dire situation into, getting involved. So I'm one of the leaders of the legislation, getting this done. There's supporters of this from across the country, and this is a strong outcome, and we'll keep on it. But thank you for bringing that up. All right, let's go back to Ogden with Jake. Jake, are you on?
Yep, I'm here.
This is Blake from Ogden originally. So go ahead, Jake from Ogden. Sorry, my team doesn't like it when I'm corny.
Yeah, I was just wondering, so I know that President Trump has instilled a lot of tax benefits for people working overtime. What is that going to look like on their tax return? Is that going to be direct money back in their pocket, or how's that going to look?
Well, it will be when you pass something like this, it's a little new, right? And it wasn't exactly clear on how it was going to play out, right? And we as one of the tax writers on this committee, we were really concerned about the potential for manipulation, right? Like people would, not extend out and just claim it was overtime when they're their first 40 hours, and so we had to put a whole bunch of parameters around it to make sure. But for folks that are digging in and companies that need extra overtime, they're going to get a reduction, a reduced rate from those extra hours that are working. In most cases, we should be able to, and as the Department of Treasury wraps their head around this one, because they have to go through a whole bunch of procedural changes on when new policy comes up. We should be able to get this so it kind of is reflected in your pay stub or your W-2. But ultimately, you're working overtime. You're not paying that tax same rate on that extra time that you're working. I'm really hopeful that this doesn't get manipulated over the course of the next 4 years, right? Because that's how long this particular policy is in place. So we can look at it and we can say, hey, productivity went up. Folks got to keep more of the extra time that they're working, and we saw them use that in the economy, and we saw good, strong growth from that. And that's the play. So the particulars should be, largely worked out within the opportunity for a deduction. So you can get up to like 12,500 is the amount that you're allowed up in the deduction. So you had to kind of cap it, but when people are willing to work overtime, and there should be a benefit for that. All right, let's go to Logan with Emily. Emily, are you on?
Yes. Thanks for taking my call. You kind of touched on this, and forgive me if I'm a little uneducated, but you mentioned of how small a percent of the funding that gets voted on and gets so much public attention for the budget. And so I just want to know, you're doing what you can, but what are you doing? Why? Let's get it so that more of the the spending gets voted on. What are you doing to try and restore accountability for all the funds being spent?
Emily, there's a very good chance that this was a plant because of our bill that we have, but I actually am quite certain you're very authentic. But
yes, I am.
I say that in jest, right? There's an organization called Americans for Prosperity, and they're heavily focused on matters of debt. And they came to our office about last Congress to be like, hey, you're on the Budget Committee, you're on the Ways and Means Committee. We love that where you're positioned to be able to go after our real, significant debt drivers, and we've got an idea. And so we've proposed this now for the second Congress. It's called the Comprehensive Congressional Budget Act, and all it simply says is we have to vote on everything. It doesn't dictate, where you're going to make cuts. It doesn't do anything. It just says we have to vote on everything. So I mentioned earlier that about $1.8 trillion is what's called discretionary, and that's defense, HHS, veterans, transportation, so infrastructure, things like that. That's $1.8 trillion of $7 trillion budget. So that's the core of what we vote on an annual basis. About approximately $5 trillion goes on automatic spending. It's called mandatory spending. That's because it's Social Security, it's Medicare, it's Medicaid, it's a few other types of welfare programs like SNAP and TANF. There's some veterans programs that are placed in there. And my supposition on this is that's ridiculous. We can vote on those and still pass those and still support Social Security, but we need like every year, or even if it was every 2-year term, right? Even if it was every 2 years, I would take it, that we had to at least vote on these things, because there are so many small things you can do to these big, huge programs like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, that you can do on a gradual basis to help improve and get these programs in the right spot. And by voting on them, you're going to constrain the funding, but also make sure that they get addressed. The reason that the appropriations, aka the discretionary budget, only grows at a small clip, like I said, we're actually cutting spending this year, year over year, but even in normal times, in other years, it generally grows at a very small rate, at or near or lower than inflation. That's because we vote on it, and we have to all come together and do that. It's the reason why our debt has grown. Back in 1970, less than 25% of our budget was mandatory, and now it's more than 75%. The other big aspect, of course, is interest on the debt. So the interest that we pay to service our debt, treasuries and things like that we have to do, that grows probably 3 times faster than anything else. Even some of our bigger programs like Social Security, Medicare, that is stuff that has to be paid. But if we can do more to reduce deficits each year, then we don't have as big a problem with that rapid growth under the interest aspect. So those are all things that we would like to see. This bill it's an uphill battle to get this done, but it makes sense to Americans. That's what we've proposed, and we've introduced it to the Budget Committee before. The other thing too, to address mandatory spending, again, I think this is actually far more doable, and I'm hopeful that we could get closer this time, is the Fiscal Commission Act. So in the 118th Congress, we passed it out of committee. I'm on the Budget Committee, and that's where we did it. And then it was going to the floor. But interestingly enough, some outside groups they started to sort of attack it, even though it had every single Republican in Budget Committee vote for it. And that's Chip Roy, all the way to some very moderate districts in California and New York. We had everybody on board, and we had 4 or 5 Democrats on board. That would translate it to, I'm quite confident we could get 30 to 60 Democrats on board with a Fiscal Commission Act. That is the way to address mandatory spending as well. Probably has more potential than the Comprehensive Congressional Budget Act that I've introduced, but both of them would try to be getting at the same aspect. So thank you. Thanks for seeing the big picture on the debt and how difficult that truly is. But again, do want to highlight, we have experienced deficit reduction this year. That's positive. That's something that gets me excited to get up and come to the gig, come to the job. Let's go back to Layton. Shane. Shane, are you on?
Hey, yeah. How you doing?
All right,
today?
Go ahead.
So, going back to what we were talking about earlier with ICE, why doesn't Congress pass some sort of bill or resolution so that on the census only United States citizens are to be counted for the apportionment of congressional seats and for the Electoral College? That way illegal immigrants aren't empowering left-wing sanctuary areas to have greater sway over our federal policy. Does that
right.
make sense? Is that something that could be possible?
Yeah, so I'll point to legislation that we passed last April. It's called the SAVE Act, HR 22. And it does that. It does a few very... When you take the politics out of this one and you look at the actual specifics, it shouldn't be very controversial. States must review voter rolls and remove non-citizens, so it's a requirement to do that. Utah, does this well. We just want to make sure this is common practice. It requires voter ID and proof of citizenship. It's already law, and here's where it gets kind of tangled. It's already law that you have to be a citizen in order to vote in these elections that you mentioned. But like the SAVE Act is going to make sure that we require that identification and proof of citizenship because there are loopholes in this. And when you're going through an immigration status or change or parole potential, like there's ways that you can enact it and kind of slip through the cracks, and eventually it probably would catch up to you. But those loopholes do exist, and if you're not really tight with with the requirements, that can become a problem. And so the opposing arguments on this are, well, it's already illegal, so why are we doing this? This is just a messaging thing and blah, 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 blah. And then our side is like, well, there's loopholes, and we want to make sure that it's very tight. Like, I think these are 80-20 issues that citizens, voter ID, things like that. Done very well in Utah, and given that sort of political narrative that I've just kind of shared, and that's generally what you would hear if you were watching an hour debate from it going one side to the other on something like the SAVE Act. And so this is over in the Senate, and the Senate has different rules that govern their body. You'd have to get past the filibuster, and I would say that the filibuster is not what it really used to be. The filibuster used to have to talk it out, and it's kind of like there's a shortcut to it now. But I think that if you were to sort of force this vote and force there to be people talking for hours on hours on hours and days, like you'd run out of things to say, like, okay, well, we'll let the SAVE Act go and we'll see if they can get a majority support for it. Like, there's all sorts of talk about that with this particular type of legislation and other things that are sort of more 80-20 issues. But this becomes the Senate is a roadblock on this one. We obviously know the president would sign it, and we'll kind of see what the next few months holds if the bill that we passed back last April can have any potential movement. So thanks. I hope you appreciate that little bit of perspective. Let's go up to Park City. Amazing name in Park City, Storm. I wish it would storm more. More eye rolls from my team with corny dad jokes, but it seems like a day for those. Let's get some more snow out there. It would be great. And I haven't even had a chance to ski yet, but great name. Let's go to Storm.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes, any more snow would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for taking my call. I guess one of your callers was saying how they feel safe with the ICE operations. That's great. I do not. My family who lives in Minnesota, in St. Paul, Minneapolis, do not. They're afraid to leave their homes to go do normal, everyday things. Some of their kids are out of school because schools have closed not because of protesters, because of ongoing ICE operations. And I guess I would like to hear from you why you continue to support an administration who ignores laws such as that pertain to the Epstein files release, which you voted for, encourages federal agents to violate First and Fourth Amendment rights, and promise them full immunity no matter what they do, threaten our allies, impose tariffs, which are just taxes on us American citizens. We pay those, who allowed DOJ to run rampant with no oversight and steal our personal data and do who knows what with it, put proceeds from the sale of Venezuelan oil into an offshore account that Donald Trump controls, not in the U.S. Treasury, openly takes bribes in the form of an airplane, the president's cryptocurrency scam, suggests suspending the midterm elections, and a man who is obviously cognitively and physically impaired and appears to be hiding some kind of medical condition. And I could go on, but I guess my question is, what is your red line? What's it going to take for you to stand up to the administration for the American people and for the people you represent and do what we want you to do?
Excellent. Thanks, Storm, for the call. I appreciate the passion and what you bring to it. It's so you list off a lot of things there. I've tried to jot down a few of these. So if I look at my time in my 5 years, I first ran starting 6 years ago about this time, end of January. Like, I have really tried to navigate some impossible worlds. And my third day was whether or not to vote on the certification. The majority of my party in the House didn't. Now, the majority of Republicans in the Senate did vote to certify. But the House is a different beast, to be honest with you. And I voted from the most conservative district to certify the election, right? And for January 6th commission that was very bipartisan and actually gave Republicans a strong voice in this and all that kind of stuff. Those are really tough, right? Those were tough. And then as Biden took over, I was, would strongly oppose things with respect to where he was going on things, and there were many things that I agreed with, right? Supported Ukraine when it wasn't politically easy to support Ukraine. You saw the way I put out a very clear statement on all things Greenland and Denmark, even just in my own commentary right just a minute ago on ICE. I'm highlighting that there are cases that we're working through that these are individuals that we have to have deference to, and this is a different situation, but where areas where I strongly support ICE. And so I unfortunately have the responsibility to navigate virtually impossible political waters, and I think I've gotten, I am so much more interested in taking a tough stand or a tough vote and explaining it than I am to shy away from a vote because I know I could get criticized on a radio show here or there or whatnot. I voted to override President Trump's veto just a couple weeks ago for a Colorado water project that was broadly supported in Congress. Ironically, Lauren Boebert and I talked about this, and she was furious that the administration was overriding it. She voted also to override it, and I had a moment there to talk to her about how frustrated she was that this was happening. I know that draws some antennas from the administration, but just like a constituent that's frustrated, I will work with any member of the administration to explain why I may have opposed something that they were pushing. So it has been 5 years of never being able to please everybody. That is not my objective here. My objective is to be honest, though. So there are a lot of those things. I was so hopeful for Doge, but then I saw a bunch of firings that were kind of pointless because they were never going to pass muster legally. Plus, we were within weeks or even months, we were rehiring for some of those same positions, and I called all that stuff out. Right? I called out that Elon Musk was exaggerating on what type of cuts they could actually make before it became sort of in vogue to do it. And then I'm the guy that's diehard supportive of some of the policies from the administration that I love. So, yeah, it's tough. I get your frustration. I am gonna continue to call balls and strikes as best as I can do it, and move forward. Thrilled about a lot of things, and hopeful that we can pivot or make some adjustments on things in a lot of different areas. So thank you very much for that, Storm. Okay, I think this might be the last caller. Okay, wow. We did get to a lot of calls today, better than I usually do. I didn't try to be as concise as possible, but also give you the context. That's the balance that I try to create. Our last questions will be coming from Salt Lake with Michael. Michael, are you on?
Hey, Blake.
How are you? Go ahead.
Good. Calling from your old neighborhood. We attended the same 33rd Ward University, you and Jane, so it's good to talk to you again. The good old days. Hey, first of all, somebody made a call about why do we count aliens in the census? Well, that's Article 1, Section 2 of the United States Constitution. So I think you missed that. You were kind of gish-galloping around. It didn't address that. It's in the Constitution, just like due process. So some of your constituents need to remember the Constitution and read the goddamn Constitution. Second, you're a coward for not doing this in person, for filtering the questions. You're a coward. Come to Salt Lake, meet your constituents, and see how angry we are. Now, that we've got fair maps, you're not going to get voted in again. And you know that. My question is, why not grow a spine? Stand up to Trump. You got nothing to lose. You're not getting voted in again. Where are the articles of impeachment? We demand them. Trump is a fascist. He's a coward. He's threatening our NATO allies. He kidnapped Maduro.
All right, thank you. Don't remember similar conversations from the old 33rd Ward, but
no.
I
want
do
you to feel it.
I do appreciate it. Always appreciate the passion, and honestly, I told my team right before the call, like, I'm good with taking any of the criticisms or things. This is actually the best place for me to clarify a lot of this type of stuff. So, I get your frustration, and I get to run every 2 years, and I'll run on my record, and we'll hope to be successful. So we'll see how all this plays out. But again, that's neither here nor there. And I think a lot of the things that you're frustrated with, I've called out, and would hope to, usually kind of reflect at any chance I get to do a town hall in person or on telephone is no constituents probably ever agreed with everything I've done, but I think over the body of the work, there's more agreement than not. And that's what I hope to be able to do and highlight a lot of those areas that we agree. And I'm hopeful that today was a productive conversation for those listening. We usually get thousands and thousands of people on this. When I do it in person, I get 30, maybe 35 to 50. And we're in Q1. It's a very heavy DC time. I will be back. I'm making appearances all the time in the district, and would hope to connect with people back there as well. So again, thank you all. I appreciate your willingness to spend your lunch hour with me and hearing some perspective, and we'll do more of these. All the best, and we will chat soon.